Hello, so basically today what I wanted to do was I want to show you how to build an Android project entirely without Android Studio. This is kind of cool if you want to learn how the whole process works, see where all the files are coming from, or you just really don't like Android Studio, maybe it's like eating up your RAM. All those are reasons why you might want to do this. The process is a little bit complicated, you need to install a whole bunch of packages and stuff, but we are going to be building the Android project from scratch, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have all of our dependencies installed. So this is an overview. So first we're going to install Java 8, the JDK, and the JRE. For some reason the Android command line tools seem to only really work with Java 8. You can get it to work with Java 11, but there are some workarounds you need to do. We're going to install the Android command line tools. This is the only part where we're going to be doing it from a browser. Everything else is going to be done either from command line or from some sort of text editor. We're going to install an Android emulator, our platform tools, and the actual SDK stuff. We're going to install Gradle, and then we're going to move on to the coding part. We're going to install, or we're going to build our 4 Gradle files that will tell Gradle how to actually build our Android project. And then we're going to make an app folder that's going to contain some Java code, some resources for the app to be able to show up on your phone, the manifest, and some more Gradle build instructions for the app itself. So that's the basic overview. So let's get started with installing Java 8. So first thing we want to do is we're going to open up a terminal window. Again, I'm doing this all on Linux and Ubuntu, so you're going to need a terminal like that. So first thing we're going to do is do sudo apt get install. Let me make this a little bit bigger too. Apt install open JDK 8 JRE headless. So we're going to install that first, and mine is already installed. And now we're going to install the same thing, except instead of the JRE, we're going to install the JDK. So JRE stands for Java Runtime Environment, JDK stands for Java Development Kit. And we need both of those in order, because the Android apps that we're going to be writing are going to be written in Java. So we have both of those installed. Now we can test that by writing Java version, and we can see that we have Java correctly installed. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our Android build tools. So we can do that by navigating to a specific URL. So if we go back here, this is the URL that we're going to go to. I'll post this in the description of the video. But we're going to go to a web browser here and go to that URL. We're going to go to, let's see, download options. Then we're going to go to command line tools only, because again, we're going to be doing this all from the command line. So we're going to download that, and it's going to download a zip file. So we're going to hopefully extract that. It's going to take a second to download the zip file. You're going to extract it. It has a file named tools in it. So we're going to go to, let's make a new directory. We'll call it Android stuff. And we're going to extract all the stuff into Android stuff. Okay. So in Android stuff we have this thing called tools. So that's great. So let's go back to our command line. The fans are driving me nuts. Okay. So we're going to go over to we're going to cd into that Android stuff folder that we just made. You can see there's tools. We're going to cd into tools. And you can see there's a whole bunch of programs. We've got a program called Android, emulator, and then there's a folder called bin, so we can cd into bin. And you'll notice that there's even more tools. So there's a lot of really good stuff in here. We're going to make it easier on ourselves, and we're just going to add tools and bin to our Linux path variable, so we can access all of these programs just by typing in their name. So how do we do that? Well, we can go to out of this, and we're gonna type in sudo nano, actually just nano.bash rc, which is sort of the rules that the terminal follows. And you're gonna go all the way down to the bottom, and we're gonna add those folders to our path variable. I think I already did it, but yeah, so you're gonna write in export path equals path plus our folder, and you want to do that for both tools and bin. Okay, we're going to exit out of that. So now what we can do is if you type in Android, it should be a program, and it'll give you some options, right? So now that that's done, let's go back to our guide here and see what else. So now we need to install our Android emulator, platform tools, and SDK. So that's pretty straightforward. We're going to start with the emulator. So we're going to if you type in SDK manager list, this is one of the programs that was installed with the tools. It's going to fetch the repository of SDK tools. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And you can see these are all of the available. Let me see if I can make this a little bit smaller. So these are all the available SDK stuff. And we can install all this stuff, but we only need a certain few things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to install our emulator. So if you scroll down, the past platform tools sources, you can look at system images, and these are going to be the emulator images that we can download through the SDK command line manager and then install. So by the time this video comes out, you might be watching it and there's probably going to be like some updates, but you're probably going to want to go down to the bottom, get the newest system images. For me, it's system images Android 29 default, x86 64. You can get some of the more complicated ones like Play Store or whatever, but we're going to keep it simple for this. And we're just going to use this. So we're going to type in SDK manager and then type in the package that we want. And we're going to go. So it's going to go ahead and install that. Okay, so it finished installing that. So we're going to go over to, so we type in ls. We're going to type in cd android stuff, and we are going to cd into our, actually I think we're going to go to emulator. And now you'll see that inside of emulator there's this emulator program. So now that we have the tool for the emulator that we just installed through SDK Manager, we're going to see if we can launch the emulator. My guess is it's going to be missing a few components, so it'll tell us what components it's missing, and then we'll just install those. So we are going to go there. Let me just see. In fact, we're actually just going to install some components right now. So we're going to type in SDK Manager list. So it's going to fetch our repository. And after we've already installed system image, we're going to want to install platform tools, and that's sort of just a general thing. So we're going to install our platform tools. Then you're going to want to install the latest platforms for your Android version. So for me, it's 29. And then the last thing is build tools. So if we go to build tools, you're going to want to install your latest build tools. So 3 more things. So we can install those right now. So SDK Manager, platform tools, and then we need platforms Android 29, and then we're going to need build tools 29.0.2. So those 3 things, it's going to go ahead and fetch those, and it's going to install. It might give you this warning that it can't find a repository saying the .android of your home directory. Don't worry about that. It still seems to work fine without that. Okay, so now we're going to actually make our emulator. The way that we do that is if you type in avd manager, that should be a program, again, because we added those programs to our path variable. So we're going to type in avd manager, create avd, and and we're going to give it a name with the end flag. I'm going to call it buddy. We're going to do -k to give it the system image that we downloaded. I'm not sure which system image. I think it was this one, system images Android 29. This is the one we downloaded. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to give it a device. So this is mostly just to determine like screen size, things like that. Device Nexus 6P. There we go. And it's going to create our virtual device. Now we can launch that, but you'll notice that you can type in emulator and that is a program. However, there's a weird glitch in the Android tools where it only really works if you launch the emulator by calling on the emulator program itself. So you type in /emulator and then give it the flag AVD and then the name, and we named it buddy, so we're going to type in buddy. And okay, so as it turned out, there was a problem. What you need to do is you need to type in Android update SDK, and I didn't do that, so it just basically updated the repositories to figure out where everything was. So I ran that, and then I ran AVD manager, create AVD, gave it a name, gave it the correct system image that I downloaded, and then gave it device Nexus 6P, and it was able to do that. So anyways, now we can launch that emulator. I found this whole emulator part is a little bit buggy, so you might need to play around with it, but we'll go to, we're going to type in emulator AVD buddy, and it's going to launch our emulator. Alright, so I was originally using my camera for my phone, and the ADB only communicates with one device at a time, so currently it's communicating with the emulator. That's why we lost the camera feed. That's okay, so we have this emulator up and running, and yeah, so that works. So now what we need to do is we need to actually build our Android project. So we're going to create a new terminal, and we're going to zoom in. So now what we need to do, we're going to make a directory called project, and we're going to cd into it. And in fact, we're going to do this from Atom, because I feel like that's a little bit easier than working with these rinky-dinky text editors. So we're going to go to Atom. Atom is just a really nice text editor, and we're going to do File, open folder, and we're going to go to that project folder that we made. Okay, so we have this. So the first thing that we need to do, and also I forgot to install, we need to do sudo apt-get install Gradle. And we're going to go ahead and install Gradle there. Gradle is the tool that will take all of the Java code and all of the XML files and all that stuff, bind it all together, and make it into an Android application. So that's what it's going to install right now. It's sort of a big program, so it might take a second. And then what you're going to do is you're typing sudo apt-get install ADB. And ADB will allow your app, after it's built by Gradle, to be installed onto the phone, onto the emulator. So that's that. So we're going to go back to Atom for a second. And we need to build a grand total of, let me make sure I have this correct. We need a total of 4 Gradle files inside of our root folder. So this is going to be our root folder, and the first one is going to be called build.gradle. So we're going to make a new file. We're going to call it build.gradle. So So that's going to be in our root directory, build.gradle right here. So what's going to be in that? Well, first we're going to type in a build script, and we're going to tell our Gradle exactly what to do. So we're going to type in repositories, Google. So we're telling Gradle to use the Google repositories and these JCenter repositories. So that's effectively all we're doing. We're going to change this just so it's a little bit nicer to Java. And then inside the build script, after repositories, we add dependencies. And then class path com.android.tools.build Gradle 3.5.2. It doesn't actually matter whether this matches the current build of your Gradle. For some reason this just seems to work. I think it's actually ignored because Gradle's already installed, but that's okay. And then we need an all projects, repositories. So we're going to add Google and JCenter to all projects here. You don't really need to understand what this actually does in order to get it to work. And then we're going to give it a task. So if you want to clean the project, what it will do is it will delete the build folder. Clean, type delete, delete root project dot build dir. All right. So that's pretty straightforward. So we've got our build script. Now, I said that there's 4 files that need to go in here, so there need to be 3 more. So we've got our build.gradle. The next thing we need is a gradle.properties. So what's going to be in this? Well, this is just going to tell the Gradle some specific settings that the Gradle needs. It's only 3 lines, so you don't really need to understand how it works exactly. This is just necessary stuff to communicate to the Gradle. Okay, so you have these 3 setting lines for our Gradle build. The next one is important, and you need to understand what's going on here. So we're in properties. It's called local.properties. And here is where we're going to define where we tell the Gradle to look for our SDKs. So we're going to type in sdk.dir, so our SDK directory equals, and then we put in our SDK directory. So for me, it's going to be home / my username / Android stuff, and that's it, right? Because if we go back to terminal here for a second, Android stuff has platform tools, platforms, tools. So all the stuff that we installed, that's going to be our SDK location, okay? So that's our SDK location, local.properties. Now the final file that we need for our Gradle build is going to be, what is it? Settings.gradle. Okay, so this is again an important one. You need to understand what it does. So we're going to have a main file that's going to contain our Java code, and our resources. So we're going to make that right now. We're going to say new folder, main items. Okay, so we have a folder called main items that has all of our Java code and stuff in it. In our settings.gradle file, we're going to tell it that that is going to be where all of our main stuff is. So we're going to type in include :main items. So it's going to look in our root and it's going to look for main items, and it's going to say that is where all of our code is. And then we're going to say root project dot name equals, and then you can sort of call it whatever you want. I'm going to say it my app. Okay. So that's that. So now we have the four Gradle build things, 4 Gradle build files. Now we need to actually build our app. So we're going to go into main items. Again, like I said, this is where all the code is going to be. We're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it Java. So this is where all of our Java code is going to be. So in our Java folder, we're going to create a new thing called new file. We're going to just call it main activity. So this is going to be the main thing that pops up, main activity.java. It's an empty file, and in it, we're going to put some Java code. We're going to call it package. And this is where it gets a little bit weird. So we're going to declare a com.example.app, and I'll show you where this ties back later. We're going to import the correct packages to be able to display this main activity. It'll be Android x.app compat.app.app compat activity. So this is just the library that allows to show all the pretty buttons and stuff. Public class main activity extends app compat activity, and then we're going to give it our entrance method here. Let's see, there's the at override. So this is the part that I'm going to explain. So we've got super.onCreate, and then we're going to set our contact view to a XML file that we haven't made yet, but we're going to make that in a second. r.layout.activity main. So this is an XML file that we haven't made yet. So in fact, let's make that. So we've got our Java code in this, and this is all that runs. This is just going to pop open our main activity. So then inside the main activity, we're going to go into main items, and we're going to make a new folder called resources. This is going to contain our images, our icons, and all sorts of stuff like that. So we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it main activity.xml. Actually, so we're going to save this. We're going to actually make this a little bit more organized. We're going to make a new folder. We're going to call it layouts because, again, main activity, that's going to be a layout. And we're going to put that in layouts. Main activity.xml. So, and I name that activity main. It should be main activity. So then what's going to be in our main activity? Well, let's see. We're just going to make it a really simple layout here. In fact, I'll just copy and paste it so you don't have to see me writing it all out. But this is a really simple XML file. So basically we're going to put a constraint layout here. We're going to have the width match parent, height match parent, all this. And then we're going to add a text view in it. And we're going to type in hello world inside the text view, and this is going to be sort of in the center of our app. Okay, so that is our main XML file. We got our main Java file, and that's that, right? So there's another important resource file that we need here. Actually, before we do that, let's make our Android manifest. So we've got our Java file, our resources. We're going to make a new file called Android manifest.xml. Okay, so in this file, it's going to describe sort of what goes on inside of our app, like what things are called first. So I'm just going to, this is a little bit longer, so again, I'm going to copy and paste and I'm going to describe what's going on here. So we've got our manifest, and this is an important line here. So this describes where your app can be found on your phone. This is like the whole really long name for your thing, and it needs to match what goes in here. So package com.example.app, that's what we decided to call it. So we're going to call it com.example.app. Okay? So these things need to match. And then when you release new versions of the app on the Play Store or whatever, you don't change this, you change the version number. This is always going to stay the same for your app. Now in your application, these are just some things. So allow backup, I'm not really sure what that does, but icon. So this is going to be a trace to our image that's going to show up on the phone as the icon for the app. The label, the string name, again, a theme, and then our declaration of our main activity. So we're going to do activity.main activity. That needs to match your Java file name, main activity, and we're going to give it the intent as main and launcher. So we need to fill in some things. We don't have an icon here called clone. We don't have any strings yet. This is all we have. So these things are going to be in our resources. So we're going to go to resources. We're going to make a new file, or a new folder, and we're going to call it drawable. So in drawable, we're going to put our icon image. So just look up Android image. PNG, and I guess we'll go with this because this is kind of cool. So we're gonna do save image as what? That's a JPEG. Okay. Save image as, is this a PNG? Yep. Android. In pictures. Actually, we're just gonna save it to our actual. So I'm going to go to Android stuff, project, main items, resources, drawable, android.png. Perfect. Okay. So now if we go to drawable, we've got android.png right there. So if we go back to our manifest, our drawable file, and then we're going to do Android. Not android.png, just Android. Okay. And again, for our round icon, because Android requires you to have a normal icon and a round icon. My guess is they have some sort of setting in mind for that. And again, we're just doing the same thing, Android. Okay, so that was easy. So now we need to add a string resource directory. And yeah, in fact, we're going to put these all in a folder called values. So we're going to make a new folder called values. And inside values, there's going to be 3 files. There is going to be values for colors, strings, and styles. Okay, let's create a new file. We're going to call it colors.xml. If we go to colors, the current theme that we're using here requires 3 different colors. It requires a primary dark, and a color accent. So I just defined those here. So we're going to save that. Forgot to save that. We're going to make another one called strings. And then the only thing in strings is going to be our app name. It's going to be my application. In fact, we're just going to call it my Gradle app, because that's what we're doing. We're building this from scratch with Gradle. And its name is app name. So if we go back here, string app name. So that's going to be our icon label on the home screen of our phone. Last thing we need is a styles.xml. Should do new file, styles.xml. Okay, so I'm going to go to styles. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste this that I wrote here. So this is a theme from our SDK that we downloaded, theme.appcompat light dark action bar. And then in it, it's going to pull colors from our color resource right over here. And that's that. So that's our styles. And you can change this. You can look up different themes and see, what you want to use there. But just make sure in your Android manifest to define the theme here. So connect it back to here. Whatever you want to do in your styles. But your name is here. Put it in your manifest. Okay. So now all of this stuff is connected up. There is one thing that we need to do that I'm not entirely sure why it's necessary, but it's some weird advanced Android thing that doesn't seem to work without doing this. Create a new folder or a new file, drawable, and this is important. It needs to be in drawable, and we're going to name it IC Launcher foreground.xml. This is important that you name it this exact thing. And again, in resources, you do need to name this exactly drawable layouts and values, because that's what our Gradle build looks for in our resources folder. You can name this resources thing anything you want, because we're going to go back and tell Gradle where to look for resources in Java code. But everything inside resources needs to have these exact names. So in our IC Launcher foreground, I'm going to copy and paste some of this. Now, I believe what this does, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe what this does is, like, on your home screen of your phone when you have your icon, if you press on the icon, it sort of bulges a little bit or something like that. I believe that's what this code does. I'm not really sure. I didn't write it. But Android throws an error without having this, so that's that. So this is the one file that I'm not really sure what's happening in it, but it's necessary. And then the very last thing that we need to do, and this is probably the most important step here, is in main items we need to put another build.gradle file. So we're going to type in new build.gradle. And this is more build instructions for our Gradle builder. Let me just save this. So in this is we're going to apply a plugin called com.android.application. Just make this a little bit more colorful here. Now we're going to define some instructions, and we're going to tell it compile STK version to whatever version you installed. So for me it was 29. Build tools version, again, whichever one you installed in those previous steps, make sure that these things match. So 29.0.2, and then we're going to add a default config. And then we're going to put in some information here. So your application ID, this is really important. This could break your build if you don't put this in correctly. So this needs to be, your application ID needs to match the one that you put into your Android manifest right here, com.example.app. I mean, you can name it whatever you want, but it needs to match. So com.example.myapp, okay? com.example.app. So that needs to match there. Just app. Min SDK version, so define what is the minimum. I would just go with 15 because that seems to work pretty well. Your target is going to be the one that you installed, so your 29. Version code, 1 obviously because this is your first version. version name 1.0. These things don't really matter. And then this one, I don't think this is, this might break your code if you don't include it, because this is just for testing, but may as well include it. Test instrumentation runner, this. All right. Now, this is an important step. We've got source sets. This is where we tell Gradle to look for all of our stuff, okay? So we're gonna type in main, brackets, and then we're gonna type in where to look for the Java code. So we're gonna type in java.source directories equals Java. So what are we saying here? It's saying, okay, look in main items, because remember in our settings.gradle we said that main items is going to be sort of our root of our app. So if we go back here, inside of main items, look for a folder named Java, okay? That's going to be where our Java stuff is. Resources, so we're going to type in resource.res.source directories equals res, and instead of resources, we're going to type in, or we're going to type in the word resources, because that's the folder where all of our resources are in. Res.source directory. All right. The last one is going to be where we need to tell it where to find our manifest. So we're typing manifest.src file, and then type in where you would find it. In this case, it's in the root of our app folder here, just Android manifest. We're just typing Android manifest.xml. If it was deeper in somewhere, like if you put it in a subfolder, you need to put that into this path right here. But in our case, we didn't, and that's that. Last thing, very last thing, is we're going to declare our dependencies for this. So basically, the libraries that we're going to include. I'm just going to copy and paste them. So we've got our app compat library, we've got our layout library, and then we've just got a file tree implementation. So 3 dependencies, that's it. And yeah, so that's that. So if you have all of these things installed, we're looking at how many files did we make? We made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9, 10, 11. And then plus these 2 images. So we're only talking about 13 files to build an Android project, which is pretty good. So we're going to make sure that we did everything correctly. So we're going to go over to this. We're going to cd into our project. cd project. And now what we're going to do is we're going to type in Gradle debug assemble. This will tell Gradle to assemble, to build a debug version of, it'll output an APK, an application file, which we can then install. Type in Gradle debug. All right, what's the error? Okay, so after some crazy debugging, I figured out the reason why it wouldn't build was because in my local.properties I added a semicolon, or a quotation mark after my path to the SDK, and it couldn't find it, so Gradle wouldn't build. So after I do this, it should build perfectly fine. Type in Gradle assemble debug, and it's going to go ahead and build. Okay, so do you remember what I said about how the files, the folders in the resource folder need to have these exact names? Well, I originally had this folder as layouts with an S instead of just layout, and Gradle couldn't find what we were looking for, especially in this line in the Java code where it said r.layout.activityMain. There was no such thing. It was r.layouts with an S. So I renamed this to layout, and everything seems to work okay. I ran Gradle assemble debug, and it seems to work. So now, if we type in ls, our cd main items, we can see that now there's a build folder. We're going to cd it into build, cd outputs, cd apk, and you can see cd debug, And you can see that now there is a main items debug.apk. So there's an application file that our Gradle built. So now what we need to do is we need to go in and we need to install that onto our emulator. So we can do that pretty easily. So let's go through and do that. So we're going to type in adb devices. You can see that there's an emulator attached. So we're going to do adb install main items debug.apk. Oh, I have a phone plugged in somewhere. So let me unplug that. Okay, I'm going to try that again. And it says success. So now if we go over to our emulator here that we have open, scroll up, we can find my Gradle, open it, and there you have it. This is our app. And that's it. So we built this entire app from scratch without ever touching Android Studio, and it worked. So there was a lot of problems we ran into though, and I fast forwarded through a lot of them, but you might, and you probably will run into these same problems. That's the nice thing about Android Studio, is that it'll set all of these things correct the first time, whereas if you're making it from scratch, you need to sort of set them correct yourself. But if all said and done, once you do it all, hopefully you get a better understanding of how Android works, and maybe you might be able to make your app more customized, make the paths a little bit more organized to your liking, and yeah, that's it.